The other thing he says later on is if states don't do this, they will be denied federal funds through Title IX. Well, what arm of the federal government determines who gets Title IX funding and all that kind of stuff? Department of Education. If you don't do it through the Department of Education and spread it out evenly, then it becomes congressional pork. It means that if the congressmen and the senators from these red states want funding for education in their school, they got to stand on the fucking floor and beg for it, hat in hand. It's one of the reasons why they've been perfectly happy with the Department of Education existing all this time. They don't want to stand on the floor and go, I got the worst fucking test scores in the whole goddamn country. Fuck, man. Throw us some money. We ain't got shit. That's why they've been fine with it this long. And do it, motherfucker. Kill the Department of Education. All it's going to do is make blue states stronger, and the red states are going to be clamoring for budget money that you don't want to give them. I would like the Department of Education to continue existing, but I guarantee if they fucking get rid of it, it's going to hurt the red states, and they know it. Now, there's the world of education is going to change very soon, and a lot of this damage that they're going to try to do will be relatively meaningless in the near future. But it seems to me that Elon Musk is attempting, through his disdain for MAGA, to create a permanent underclass. Red state education holes. And this is part of the conversation that has to be had. Elon Musk and Trump, through the elimination of the Department of Education, is trying to gut education funding in red states so that the dumb stay dumb. Trump loves the uneducated, baby. And the world needs ditch diggers too. And where are they going to come from if all these fucking blue state people want to work in computers and work at fucking, I don't know, I was going to say SpaceX, but Blue Origin. Right? So I got to say, like, this is probably one of the best talking points Democrats could use, is that Elon Musk and Donald Trump are trying to turn MAGA into a permanent underclass of ditch diggers. That they are trying to guarantee that through lack of education, they will not nip at the heels of anybody. Now, that in their circle anyways. Because it's not going to affect fucking Chicago schools or North Shore schools or fucking New York State schools or California or Washington State. Even Oregon, for that matter, which is like 80-20 rural. It's not. It's not going to affect these students. It's going to affect fucking Idaho and Oklahoma and Louisiana and Mississippi. It's going to drop through the fucking floor. And it's like, no kid deserves to not have the best available education they can possibly get in the richest country in the world. Period. End of story. You guys know how I feel about healthcare being a responsibility, not a right. I feel the same way about education. Education is not a right because that turns it into a baseline. What's the baseline of the right? Reading, writing, arithmetic. That's how they talk about it. Education is a responsibility. The educated have a responsibility to educate everyone else that they possibly can with the best information they could possibly present to them and the best skills they can provide them with. It's a responsibility. I think it's both, but it just boils down to semantics. Well, it's a great conversation worth having. Okay, so the reason I say responsibility and not a right is because it can't be guaranteed without being interfered with. And I'll give you the example. Free speech being a right. If I stand in a field and I'm yelling and I say whatever the fuck I want, my right to do that is only limited to who's close enough to hear it and whether somebody tries to interfere with my ability to do it. And therefore, I have a natural right to free speech, to speak my mind. And only if someone acts against that right can it be taken away. That makes it a living right, something that is inalienable to the person. Healthcare is not an inalienable right because it has to be provided by a secondary person, either through work or through pharmaceuticals or research or a doctor or a nurse taking care of you. Therefore, it is a responsibility in a higher society, if that makes sense. It may sound like semantics, but it isn't. You can't again, it only becomes a right if if slaveholders had a right to cotton, is the material argument there. Does that make sense? Okay. And again, you don't have to agree with me on this. Let me just float this and you can mull it around in your head and see where it lands and if it fits in with what you're saying. And I think having a responsibility is a point of the privilege of living in a country that is as rich as the United States and actually has an element of honor and respect added to it over it just being a baseline right that exists whether anybody's around or not, whether you have a country or not, whether you have, like the right to freedom. You can run around all you want until somebody tells you to stop, right? It's freedom. Healthcare is a social benefit. Okay, yeah, I would agree, but that also fits into my responsibility argument, if that makes sense. And I feel it's the responsibility of everybody to take as good a care of themselves as they possibly can so they don't weigh down the system, the limited resources of doctors and nurses and hospitals and hospital beds so that we don't use one up if we don't need to. And if somebody is in a situation where they cannot afford to take care of themselves, we set up a system to make sure that they can be taken care of because life happens to everybody. That's the responsibility part of it, right? And I think there's a better argument, against these folks than the healthcare is a right idea. It's not landing with them. And you and I understand it's kind of almost a wash in both those ideas, but as a responsibility, it has more legs across the board. Because it's I think it's a more powerful stature to come from. I have a responsibility to keep myself healthy, and I have a responsibility to make sure that people that have things happen to them, cancer, car accident, whatever, that they did not see coming, ends up getting help. Why isn't healthcare a right? Because it's nobody is guaranteed it without someone else's labor. It can't be guaranteed without the work of someone else. A right would be something that can be guaranteed without the work of someone else. Does that make sense? Or an inalienable right that has to be protected through borders or limitations. Okay, again, it might sound like a semantical difference, an argument of semantics on our end, but it isn't. And even if that, I think, for example, I think the responsibility arc makes it so that those of us that are healthy and those of us that pay taxes and have a stable country, one of the things we can do as a responsibility to our fellow human beings is to set up a public option or Medicare, Medicaid, and the like. Yes? That's a responsibility. We have the ability to respond, and we do. Social Security is different because you pay into it. So your payments are a right because you paid into it. It's not an inherent right. It's a program set up. Right? What are workers' rights? Well, I would argue that if workers could, that's a good question. Okay, so let's say workers should have the right to gather together if the boss is treating them unfairly and say, hey, we're all going to walk off the job. If you don't give us, like better work hours or whatever, you need us more than we need you. And so fuck you. That they have the right to do that. That's inherent. Any group of people can decide to do that on their own and take their lumps as part of it. So workers' rights, the right to unionize, I think would be an inherent right. Because you can do it anyways. The only thing that keeps you from being able to do it is someone actively stopping you. Not, You don't have if a union is formed, the company doesn't have to pay for the union leadership or pay your dues. You see what I mean? So you have the right, any group of workers has the right to go, we're leaving, bye. So if they can do it for free and they can do it on their own, it's a right. And if the government or a company or whatever tries to stop them from doing it, that is a violation of their rights. That's why I think like workers' rights to unionize should specifically be a right, whether it is or not, Karate Joe. Right of free association. That is exactly right. And free association, I think, also fits the unionization. Also, corporate boards have the right to form a board and gather together and find a way to cut pay and shifts and all that kind of stuff so that they can maximize profits. Then it only makes sense that the other side of the equation, the working staff of a place, can get together and have their own set of demands. Nothing wrong with that. Seems reasonable to me, and it's something they could do anyways. You have to fight for your right to party. I'm sorry, Cat Femme. That's you gotta. No one has the right to take away the right of another. Exactly. And so that right has to exist regardless of other people involved. Okay? If I have the ability to walk down a road that exists and no one can, I don't have the right to demand somebody put me in a wheelbarrow and they do the walking and I ride in it. I can't demand that. But I should have the right, if anybody blocks me from walking down that road, to move that person so I can continue to walk. Again, we're talking about rights versus privileges versus responsibilities. Okay? And I would argue that if somebody has the right to walk down a road and someone is blocking that right to walk down the road, there is a responsibility by the rest of the people who want to walk down that road to help that person continue down the road and move the person who's in the road out of the way so that everybody can fulfill their right to walk down that road. That would be that would be the example of like the free association or free speech, those kind of things. Move the blockades, and now there are obvious limitations. If you have the right to walk down the road, but let's say you're walking down the road, you're serpentining so that you're slowing everybody else down. That would be yelling fire in a crowded theater in terms of free speech. You are still using your free speech, but you're using it in a way that is limiting the rights of other people. And so the group could set, that's where we get into the gray area of what kind of rules you can set to limit those kind of things. So you don't have pure free speech, you don't have you don't have pure free association. You can't murder somebody and then not go to jail for that murder and still have free association. We take away free association when you commit certain kinds of crimes. Okay? You're overthinking how all semantic arguments aside, people pay taxes and they expect to have a say in how it's spent. This is a bit Ayn Randy. No. Again, is there a direct agreement? Peter Reed makes a good point. You're overthinking this, Hal. All semantic arguments aside, people pay taxes and they expect to have a say in how it's spent. Agreed. But again, the right to have a say in how your money is spent, I would say is an inherent right. Right? But if you don't have if 100% agreement, there's going to be variance in how some of the folks want their tax dollars spent and some don't. If a majority or a significant minority don't want their money spent on healthcare, you either have to convince them that they should or you can't because it's not inherent. You have to spend money on it. That money has to go someplace. Somebody's got to eat. Someone's got to wake up in the morning and do that task of going to the hospital, treating people, giving them, somebody's got to make medicines. A nurse has got to check their pulse on the regular. All the things that have to happen. That is the effort of another human being. And so you don't have the absolute right to their effort. You can't commandeer their effort. You give away that right to your congressional rep. Well, they're supposed to represent your party. You don't give away that right. They're supposed to be responsive. But again, there's it depends on how convincing your argument is in something that isn't an inherent right. Hal doesn't believe in positive rights, only negative rights. It doesn't matter what I believe in. It's can you make a case that positive rights actually exist without someone else creating them for you? Through their effort. And in which case, that person who creates those positive rights or helps you defend them or whatever deserves something from you, one would think, because they don't have to do it. And if you rely on them to do it, then a positive right isn't yours. You can't make it happen without the effort of someone else. So it doesn't exist in a vacuum. Yeah, freedom of speech meet defamation. Right. That's the gray areas. Right. No rights exist without society. No, you can defend singularly your rights, right? If you're able to. And a lot of rights are moral rights. Isn't this why we're not a direct democracy? Honestly, Fish Dude, I would say we're not a direct democracy because when democracy was thought up, there was no way to guarantee it was direct. I mean, you could argue that polling in some ways is becoming the direct democracy, depending on how realistic or believable the stuff is. The Persians invented democracy. Well, no, it's been tried by several different societies over time. I mean, there were variant degrees of democracy, both pure and representative. On almost, the Greeks did. There were like Northern European tribes that tried, like a lot. Yeah, no. And again, the invention of it does not prove the point that that was the best version of it either. Right? Les Paul invented the electric guitar. Period. Is he the greatest guitar player that ever lived? Don't be ridiculous. See what I mean? Just because you started something doesn't mean your version of it is the penultimate, or is pure, or is how it's supposed to be done, or the only way it can be done. We took these ideas from the Iroquois. Well, they killed the Erie Indians to. So, again, you can argue that we also, if we didn't take imperialism from the Iroquois, you're talking about the Iroquois Nation Treaty, which lasted, I think, somewhere between like 2 and 3 years before it fell apart. So no. And again, I've made the point before that the Iroquois, took land from the Erie Indians and they came across good old Lake Erie. That's where it got its name from. And what's the difference between them crossing a lake and pilgrims or somebody else crossing an ocean? Saltwater? Distance? What's the moral? What's the moral hierarchy of I crossed a river and stole somebody's land versus I crossed an ocean to do it? Right? Does it matter? Sure it does. Because it determines what you're fighting for. Are you fighting for something real, or are you fighting for something that you have to convince somebody else is an ideal? And that's okay. There are ideas that are worth fighting for, but they're not inherently mechanical. And those are the ones, I think, that require more patience and communication. You've got to have better communicative skills to extend this to other people. Because they're not going to get it right away. I'm enjoying this conversation. I know I'm not playing a clip right now, but so much shit is up in the air. And Trump's just talking blather. Fucking, what's her name? Carolyn Leavitt walked back his whole thing about the president is not committing troops in Gaza at this point. Like, motherfucker, yes, he did yesterday. He said, we'll do whatever has to be done and we're going to own it. That's pretty definitive, dum-dum. You have to fight for your rights. No one gives them to you. But there's some inherent, you only have to fight for the rights that people are trying to take away. TYT is freaking out. Why? They get too much of what they wanted too quickly? Good God. You'd rather not hear the orange Nazi? I completely understand. But I'd love to be proved wrong. We haven't heard Musk ask to defund NASA. Yeah, you're not going to until Blue Origin wins a contract over him, and then everybody will go, why are we even going to these places? How the Iroquois withdrew by themselves and things returned to a more normal way. Really? They just withdrew by themselves? Really? That's where you're going to go? They just withdrew? Come on. Come on. Oh, TYT because of Gaza? What the fuck? No, I didn't cut my hair. I've got a ponytail. I'm just here. Should I just drape it around my shoulders so you guys don't panic? TYT is responsible for Gaza as much as the uncommitted crowd are. Fuck them. I'm native and I'm familiar with this. Great, Roy Batty. Terrific. Then again, how long did the Iroquois Treaty, the Iroquois Nation Treaty last amongst the 5 nations? The TYT drama is hilarious because Anna having a crash out. Again, these guys, when are people going to realize that TYT's entire gig is making Democrats not vote? That's their whole shtick. That's it. It's all they're doing. It's all they're about. They've always just been about diminishing the Democratic vote so that they have some power. If we can make if votes are won on the margin and we can talk a big chunk of the voters out of voting for Democrats, then we have some power over them to get what we want. That was the strategy. Right? The question is, and I think the assumption was for a long time with this whole Justice Democrats thing, was the idea that they were trying to do good. I have not seen any indication that they were. Sorry, what about all the Democrats who let throw genocide happen by calling it defense? Huh? Who lets throw genocide happen? I think, Gen X, you're going to have to rewrite that. I don't understand the sentence. TYT is still a thing? No, they never were. Again, I think how we talk about some of these things has value. And that we have to be able to have a full conversation about stuff fearlessly without anybody worrying that we're losing sight of caring about people. And I understand some of these topics are going to be difficult because if you even open up the conversation, it might feel like you're giving ground to the other side instead of fearlessly discussing it because you think you're in the right. And usually it's the people who are the least confident about the argument that don't want it had, because they're like, oh, you're going to walk near the parts I don't understand or I can't defend. And if you start going in that direction, I won't have any ammo to talk about this stuff. And I obviously don't have that problem. So I feel like it's my moral responsibility to do this. Right? TIT needs to admit they're not progressive and they need to get out of the way. I agree. Here's the thing. They're not in the way. They just got some people's eyeballs, and those people need to fucking go. Again, this is like Twitter. I hear this argument all the fucking time from our dear friend Tara Dublin, but nobody needs to be on fucking Twitter. Nobody needs to pay Elon Musk or keep his platform afloat just because it's there. It's easier and everything's there, and I need it for business. Jesus Christ! It sounds like arguments that like people in the southern parts of France had during the German occupation. Right? It sounds like shit. Germans, you say, well, I know what he's doing is bad, but I got to do it for business. I got to keep my head down and I need it for this thing. Fuck that. I know I could have probably, monetized Twitter and all that kind of shit and made money on this back and forth, but it's not fucking worth it. I know I could get more subscriptions and make more money on this channel with clickbait fucking thumbnails. Not gonna do it. I won't. And that's got to count for something. And I'm not going to bullshit people just because they feel to make them feel better about some things, or not give them the full conversation about things, because I don't want you walking unarmed into a conversation with somebody if you think everybody's on the same page about stuff when they aren't. Let's see. I just saw a thing about Facebook about sales decline on Tesla in different countries. Yeah, that's going to increase. Yeah, same with TikTok. I'm not going to be on fucking TikTok. No. So, like, it is, sorry. Tara Dublin's point is that her books were bought by individuals who have names and they are people. I mean, again, where are you selling your stuff? It's like, you know, being a dyed-in-the-wool vegan and going, the only place I can really sell my vegetables is at the beef jerky stand because it stands out there. At a certain point, either it's worth making the sacrifice temporarily, or it ain't. Right? I you know, I don't know how else to put it. That makes no sense to me. None. You know me, lesser of two evils, choose less evil. And so there's a lot of these things that there's issues with fucking Facebook and Instagram that I don't like. But there's a very distinct difference between all the other social media networks, almost to the one, and TikTok and X, which are a fucking whole different monster. I'm not doing it. And doing it just because, well, that's where everybody is. Well, maybe you're part of the problem then. Maybe you're why they're gathering there, because you're like, you go there for the dopamine hit, and you peel your ears open. Brilliant. I prefer your convoluted puns as show titles. Thank you very much, Linda. Thank you for noticing. So, what is this? Oh, someone has an account in your name on TT. Oh, that doesn't surprise me at all. Years ago, when it first started up, before I knew what I knew about it, like when it first opened, I will often get on something and get an account because I don't want somebody to steal my name, because I don't want to be the real Hal Sparks on a fucking, or have to buy my fucking name back. And at some point, that's why there's a value to the architecture around Blue Sky and the Mastodon architecture, is because it's based on my .com, and I can own that, and then I can, you know, people can understand it's really me. But this idea that somehow you got to play in their sandbox because you might miss out on some cash or some audience, fuck them. Sorry. I'm just disgusted by the idea. What? Sorry, I cracked up when I saw that you said almost quoted by someone who owns a Tesla. It goes from 0 to 60 in 2.4 zucking seconds. Right. What's happening, Boston Brian? Good to see you, man. So I'm again. This is turning into a longer conversation. Hal, side note: if your schedule changes, please post on Blue Sky. Is your show? Is your show with Tom Arnold and Brian pay-per-view? No, it's. I think it's just live. Brian set that up. Brian Karam set that up for us to have a conversation about this stuff. And it's live at the Comedy Chateau on the 27th. Yeah, and then the 28th I'm at Flappers. Yeah, he has a Real Hal NY, I think. Okay. So again, there is, she won't leave X, much like Lemon won't leave an abusive husband. Yeah. Who owns Blue Sky? It's, it kind of doesn't matter. There are people who run the site and who will eventually monetize it. It's not monetized currently on their end. They have some traffic that they benefit from and other stuff, and I suppose, but it's the architecture that matters. It's the algorithm that matters. And on Blue Sky, you own your account base because it's based on the Mastodon architecture. So if it, you know, remember the days of Facebook, when if you wanted to leave Facebook, they owned your pictures for a while. Remember that shit, that dust up that became a thing? They own all your content. Okay, that's not true on the Mastodon architecture. It's an open architecture. Threads is actually based on it as well. So you own your shit there. And that's a very distinct difference no matter who is running that particular version. And if they fuck with you, it's easy to port yourself over to another version of the Mastodon, infrastructure, another input point. Like it wouldn't take much at all. Like all the people who are on Blue Sky are using it at the app as an input, but they're not. Your stuff isn't on Blue Sky the same way it's on Facebook or it was on Twitter. Okay? It's just different. It's built differently. Any more videos tonight? Yeah, I have a bunch. So, and I gotta say, I at this point, I don't see anybody actually on their side. I mean, they're all trying to shovel behind Trump as he makes up shit as he's going along.